Hello everybody, I am Professor Pitkar here and I am going to share all kind of things, my profession, my passion that I've been pursuing for all the 66 years of my life that it is all. Today we will begin almost from the place where I was born in Allahabad in 1953, though my grandfather is from a way place called Alibag in Chaul, and from there I shifted to a place called Kota. Kota today is very popular for the IIT classes and all kind of things happening right from suicides to education. But when I was there in Kota, there were very small places, what you can call schools, primary schools. There's hardly one college. It was in 1964 that I shifted from there to Bombay, and in 68-69 session I joined a college called Bandra School of Art, which was only one of the three colleges that we had in Bombay. Now we have about 32 colleges. Bandra School was a very small college, just a ground and two building, a great beginning for me, and that's where I learned my architecture. Completed my architecture in 1977, and then the journey begins. After completing my education in architecture, I joined a firm called Architectural Research Unit run by Chandrakant Patel. And one of the reasons why I joined that was because Chandrakant Patel had worked for one of the world's famous architect, Alvar Aalto. I liked Alvar Aalto's work. It was all curves, round and round buildings, and so did Chandrakant Patel make most of the buildings which had curvy linear lines. And a stock exchange was the building I was working when I was there as a trainee for almost a year and 9 months or thereabout. After working for Chandrakant Patel and listening to him what he said about Alvar Aalto for about a year and 9 months, then I thought let me get into a different format, and I joined Daryanani Trust. It was a trust that was making many buildings in an area called Kamshet near Pune, designing buildings for paraplegic, mentally retarded, blind, and all kind of people as a public service you can call. It was a social welfare connected trust, and it was a great fun because that is where I learned right from marking a site. In fact, I remember the day I went to the site, he says, "This is a great plot. Just measure up 18 acres out of that." And that was the first experience on site to measure how to measure 18 acres. And nothing like working on site, whatever education you have in whichever college. After working in Daryanani Trust for almost 9 years, where I did everything from measuring sites, which I mentioned, to making designs, to making working drawings, also to make bills of contractors, supervising and doing anything, everything, you really get a hang of what all architecture is, because architecture is on site. I believe that you learn about architecture, but architecture happens on site, and that is where you should be into. Well, after completing that, I realized that the practice was more complicated, and I started my practice with one or two bungalows which I designed in Lonavala. And I realized that all my friends who were telling of what practices, and by then the builders had come into Bombay, I realized that it will be better to get into other thing. And one of the teacher whom I knew was Satish Tungare, who says, "Why don't you join teaching?" I used to always like teaching because during my college years, I used to always come first and therefore teach all my colleagues over there. And I thought, okay, let me get into teaching. So it was almost way back in 1987 that I joined Sir J.J. College of Architecture, a place where I always wanted to study but could not for some reasons of locations, because Bandra School was just a kilometer from my house. So I continued teaching in J.J. College of Architecture for 28 long years. Teaching was fun because from day one, within the first 15 days, I took some 85 students to on a study tour with a colleague of mine, Harimon Pillai, and that was an experience by itself. And then right from the lecturer's post to assistant lecturer to senior lecturer to selection grade to associate professor, the ranks went on, and you started your classes in first year, basic design, construction, so on and so forth. And at the end of a long tenure of 28 years, you are in the final year teaching thesis all the time. Apart from teaching in J.J. College of Architecture, what I learned was the administrative skills, because in the last 10 years or 12 years of my teaching career there, there were many colleges which had come up from 1992. I mean, we had 2 colleges, 4 colleges, and then the admission became centralized. So the experience of doing admission round was an experience by itself. During this time, I also joined a firm called Upasni Design Cell. Deenbandhu Upasni, who is the director of the cell, is a wonderful person, a poet, a very religious person. And in the office where I am still working for the last 15 years, we got into making hotels. Many of the hotels, 5-star hotels in India, abroad, were done by our office, and I was a part of it. We did the Balewadi Stadium Hotel also, and there were some projects which are really fast, like we had to make something like 400 rooms in 4 lakh square foot in 14 months. To other hotels which are very slow also, to the Sahara Star that were designed by Pranav Upasni, son of Deenbandhu Upasni. It was a great experience to see how buildings are built at that point of a time. In this time, I realized one more thing, that if you are into teaching for all those 28 years, that just reading books and teaching from Mackay, Bannister, Fletcher was not enough, and you ought to have a lot of things like hobbies and your personal development. I always tell my colleagues that become selfish, because only if you are selfish, you'll try and do things for yourself, and when you do things for yourself to improve is where you will get into other things, improving yourself. And the first thing that I pursued was photography. I could not afford a camera. That time the salary was hardly 1200 rupees, and the only thing I had was an Agfa Click 3, one of the very, very basic camera. And that is, I started, it used to have a roll film where you could only take, I think 12 images to 16 images, depending on the length of the camera. And that hobby developed like anything. And right from that Agfa Click 3, then I went to a Russian camera, which was a Zenith, a little expensive, until almost a little recent time, I went on to Pentax K1000. I mean, everybody today is a photographer because you are using things like digital cameras, and everybody having those iPhones and mobile phones with all advanced cameras. I differ on that issue because photography is a different hobby by itself, and you have to pursue it much differently. Taking an image on your digital camera is not photography. I mean, I can go on talking. I've been conducting lectures on photography. I've conducted lectures in almost 35 to 38 colleges in Maharashtra on photography, and I still continue to do that. It's a passion by itself, and it's a great thing because when you take pictures, you look at buildings more closely, you look at their details, and that is a learning which you can shift into teaching. On photography, I shifted to putting them up because you ended up collecting many images that you made. I had not just 1, 2, 3, but I think 14 exhibitions, and I can very proudly say probably I am the only architect from India who has done 14 one-man shows. One advantage when you're on in teaching in a college is that you get a chance to go on study tour. Apart from doing those boring activities like taking attendance and seeing that everybody is and the bus, is that you can carry a camera and do a lot of photography. And while doing this, I could go to places like Mandu, to Delhi, to Agra, to Ahmedabad and whatnot. In the tenure of 28 years, for 14 or 16 years, I used to go on study tours and click all these places, which I converted into exhibitions. I always feel that just taking a photograph is not enough, because photograph is what you take and you like for yourself, and just liking your photograph is not enough. It has to be put to public opinion and public view. And when you put it to public view, there is an opinion, there is a criticism, and that is what is called learning. One of my first exhibition, which I put up in JJ College of Architecture Gallery, I still remember one of the critics saying that the exhibition is very bad, the mounting is not good, there's a mixture of subjects. And that was the learning, because then on I started to select a proper framed picture, a single topic, and that is what it was. And as somebody says, one exhibition anybody puts up. So that very day I decided I'll put up 10 exhibitions, and my second exhibition at Jahangir Art Gallery of Mandu was booked when I started that. And then on there was no end. I did an exhibition on DN Road where I photographed the buildings of DN Road of all details. I mean, lakhs and lakhs of travel from morning to evening. they don't look at the building because they are busy either going to the office because they are either late. At the end of the office, they are too busy to go back home because they are already late to reach home or catch a crowded train, and they don't look at building. In fact, the title of a review by Mustanshu Dalvi was, I mean, it was saying that it is, shock of the familiar, because we see things every day, but we don't look at them. And that is one thing I can tell architects, photographers, teachers, that start to look at things, pause over there and look at it. And of course, the second exhibition one was Romance in Red Stone, which was a book which was out of a what you call a scholarship that I got by then of Government of India, of Ministry of Culture, to photo document motifs and patterns in Islamic architecture, which I will again refer when it comes to the books. Stained glass windows is another topic which I enjoyed photographing, because Vikas Dilavari had put up scaffolding inside the building, and I could climb up 40 feet on the scaffoldings and take pictures of stained glass. Then went to Ahmedabad, Queen's Temple of Patan, Sun Temple, Modera, Gilbert's Cross, Bombay University building. Flower pot was an interesting title given by a friend of mine, saying there were images of flowers and pot, and as a gimmick, they were alternate. So I used to call it, it's an exhibition of flower pot, but nothing but a picture of a flower and a pot, a simple gimmick to create some fun out of life, things like that. And of course, during the exhibition of State of Architecture in Civil Housing, which was put up by Rahul Mehrotra, during the State of Architecture exhibition, I found that huge amount of clutter is being created in Bombay. There are buildings close to each other. There's no respect given to town planning, urban design, and there's almost an utter confusion, or urban clutter, as I called it, that was put up in one of my exhibition, which had 40 frames of buildings in Bombay. At the end of all these exhibitions, I thought that exhibitions last only for a week, and therefore I got into making books. As I said, somebody who didn't see your exhibition doesn't know what it was. You have to only tell him stories. So I thought, let's convert these exhibitions into book. And one of my first book was Romance in Red Stone, which was appreciation of ornament on the Islamic architecture, or more loosely said, motifs and patterns in Islamic architecture. Much after that, my second book came, which was titled as Whispers of the Soul by Sudhir Diwan. Sudhir Diwan is a friend of mine who wrote many poems, and he said that, can you give me equivalent images for the poem? So we spent I think a couple of meetings. I had 4 or 5 meetings in some clubs here and there, and that is where he would read poems to me, and I would at that point of a time select a photograph, and that was a book called Whispers of the Soul. Whispers of the Soul. Nari Gandhi was a joint venture with Pranav Upasni, because I had seen all the works of Nari Gandhi uh, during my college time, and after that, one of the most fantastic architect, one of the 4 architects who studied with Frank Lloyd Wright, and his work is unbelievable. Most of the works are either not there, demolished, or revised, changed. But we thought of making a book. Pranav Upasni was very passionate about it, so we made a book titled Nari Gandhi. And then there was a book. I used to shoot a lot of clay pots at Khadi Village Industries. A student of mine was there. She says, can I write a book? And I had 100 images of 100 pots. So that turned out to be a book called Pot, Potter, Prophet. I used to very jokingly say, why not add Pitkar? So it should sound like Pot, Potter, Prophet, Pitkar, and things like that. Much recently, I made a book with a colleague of mine, Harshada Bapat from Academy of Architecture, which was trying to decipher the whole vocabulary of A to Z in architecture. We called it the Little Book of Architecture, and where it says A for not apple, but A for arch, B for balcony, C for column. A book that you should have a look at it. I was also very lucky to interact with Shirish Berry for 2 long years, where we produced that book, Spaces Inspired by Nature. It was a wonderful book. And in the process of teaching, there was some practice which I did. There was a bungalow that I had designed for a private client which could not get built. Luckily, there's a book coming called The Unbuilt, where this book will cover that project, and probably very soon by December you'll have a look at that. Making books is a great fun, because I always believe that a book lasts for a time longer than your life. So I would advise all people, all my friends, all my teachers to get passionate about things, read books, write books, because they have a longer life than your life. Keep walking is another thing that I keep mentioning, because In the whole of Bombay, last 40 years, I have been going to Flora Fountain, Kalba Devi, Pureshwar, Nanachal. It's an experience by itself because when you walk, you see things. And I always believe the slide that somebody had put up on Facebook that if you rest, you rust. So just get up, keep walking, a good tagline which you can see over here. And that's an experience by itself because when you look left, when you look right, you see a lot of things in architecture which you otherwise would not see if you're in a busy schedule. So one simple suggestion, walk a lot, walk in architecture, absorb architecture, have a look at architecture. Then comes the thing of collection and passions because we always end up liking some things, and those things can be personal objects, can be anything. There was an exhibition in Nehru Center where there were about 35, 40 people who had put up whatever they liked. But then I collected fountain pens because a lot of us use are passionate about writing, sketching. I started using a fountain pen right from my school days and I have never left it. I still use a fountain pen. Writing instruments, as we normally would call, would be objects of desires. I had a major collection of fountain pens that ran into hundreds of pens. And what I realized that there's also not just the wooden pencil, but mechanical pencils by Parkers and Schaeffers. They are so beautiful and so sleek that I started collecting. In fact, I have a collection of books on fountain pens. I mean, people think that what kind of books can be there? I mean, I have a collection of 20 books just on fountain pens. There's a book which is titled as Fountain Pens of the World, which indexes almost all pens. Then there's a book which says that fountain pens of America only. There's a book called Fountain Pens of Japan, and also there's a book on fountain pen called Parker 51. So one can have a book on that. So the passion of collecting, buying, using fountain pens went on, and it was just wonderful. Apart from fountain pens, there were the ink bottles. I mean, because when you use pen, you like ink. Normally, we have the green, the black, the blue, the red. There are more than 90 to 100 colors of ink available in India now, online or otherwise in shops in Bombay. And I started collecting ink bottles. They come in various shapes, various sizes, various fonts, which was a wonderful thing. And to add to that, from 1 to 5 to 10, I ended up collecting 330 ink bottles, which I made converted into a traveling exhibition, which I did it in Bombay in Academy of Architecture. Then it went to a place in Thana, and the intention was to take the exhibition to several smaller or bigger cities so that people can know it's just not the pens but ink bottles that may connect it. Talking of ink bottles, I would like to make a mention which many might not realize. There's a DNA coded ink available called the personal code ink that you can get your ink which is specialized to a DNA code by a plant DNA, and only you can use that for your documents which can be valued in thousands of crores of rupees. And Elixir of Mont Blanc has come with an ink that has actually got gold dust. You must have seen old documents which are having gold engravings, gold writings, and now you can use an Elixir gold ink which has 24 karat gold dust in the ink, though it is very expensive, but a beautiful thing to look at. So passion of collecting fountain pens and ink bottles and inks and ink colors is another thing that I enjoyed, and I am sure that you would also enjoy. Stones is another thing because we are dealing in architecture. We start building. We started with rock cut architecture, so stone is something that is passionate to us. Of course, now we are dealing in concrete. We are dealing in steel. We are dealing with bricks and all kind of things. I started liking stones, and I think I have a fairly good collection of stones. Hundreds of stones are there lying in my house, and I would request all to visit a place called Gargoti, which is near Sinnar, a place about 22 kilometers from Nashik. There's a museum called Gargoti Stone Museum. Unbelievable collection of stones of different kind. And how can we forget Kailash Temple, which is out of one piece of rock? What happens, we went over there. I mean, all of you must have gone to Kailash Temple. Most of you must have seen it. The only story that people talk is, yeah, this is a temple that started from the top and came down. It is made out of one rock. And then people start going on to the Facebook and chats and all kinds of the mobile phones. I mean, if you look at even one panel of Kailash Temple, just imagine what efforts would have gone in making that one panel. And the whole temple is carved out of one piece of rock. One mistake and it's all gone. And to know what the challenge is, I could always say everybody that take a piece of stone and make a simple cube out of it. When you make a simple cube out of it, you'll realize what efforts go in making an ordinary cube. Then imagine converting the whole mythological stories into one temple called the Kailash temple. Nothing can beat the architecture of Kailash temple, and if you have not seen it, you have seen nothing in this life. Have a look at Gagodi Museum and Kailash temple. Then comes my other passion. I mean, it just didn't end at collecting ink bottles, stones, and things like that. I used to like flying because after completing my schooling, I joined first year science in a college called Mithibai College. And Mithibai College has a location very next to Bombay Flying Club. And the only thing that I used to look was not at the blackboard by the teacher, but out of the window where you could see small yellow colored Piper P-18 aircrafts flying. And those aircrafts are so what you call attractive and inspiring that you can just take them up and fly in the air. And I think I'll just intervene here and say, if you have read the book called Jonathan Livingston that says you're going to have wings to fly, and the wings were right outside my window of Midway College, and that's why I thought, let's fly. I joined Bombay Flying Club. I could do about 6 hours of power flying on Piper PA-18 aircraft, and then the club shut down because the main runway had to be repaired, and therefore they shifted it to Daman where I could not go. And then I also changed from science to joining architecture, and then I followed the passion of flying by getting into gliding. In Pune, there's Hadapsar, we've got these gliders. I'm not talking of hang gliders, they're the regular gliders that look like aircrafts. And then while on a study tour to Jaipur with my students, I found they were ballooning. I went up in a balloon and absolutely quiet, 5,000 above the air, and you're in a balloon. When I was in the balloon, I was quite aware of the equipment, like those things like altimeter, airspeed indicators, and the speed that you go up and go down. So the pilot asked, "How can you know?" I said, "Yes, I have an experience of flying and gliding, so I am enjoying ballooning." So he said, "Try skydiving," and that is what I did. Just about 5-6 years back, before I retired, I went to Dubai to give a lecture in a college over there, and all the money that I collected from giving my lecture was spent on jumping out of the air at 13,500 feet. Unbelievable. I mean, if you do skydiving, I think nothing to beat that experience of free fall. You jump out of an aircraft at 160 or 180 kilometer speed. You fall at a speed of 200 kilometers, and then the parachute opens. Flying, gliding, ballooning, and skydiving is another passion which I enjoyed, and I still would want to continue the same thing and also become a skydiver at some point of a time because I like flying. And read the book Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which I have made a mention earlier. And travel, I liked basically Islamic architecture. So through a tour of impressions, I went to Uzbekistan, and because my earlier book was also on Romance in Redstone, which was talking of Mughal architecture, Uzbekistan gave me a great exposure to a different kind of architecture, and wonderful place. I mean, it is still not crowded. And another area apart from the Islamic architecture that which I am studying nowadays is Buddhist architecture. So I had my another trip to Bhutan and other places like Jerusalem. I always wanted to go because didn't start, and I always wonder why they did start at one place, and I hope to go to Jerusalem at some point of a time. I still remember in my college days when that was way back in 1972, and that is the time when Sydney Opera House was inaugurated, and it was the thing, like what we have the Louvre and other museums now, and people want to go to the modern buildings. Sydney Opera House was one building I always wanted to go. I don't know whether I'll go there, but I did collect some with great pictures. Unbelievably inspiring building, the Sydney Opera House by Jon Atzon, a place we must visit. And of course, like everybody else, one would like to see the Egypt and go to Istanbul because that's where the Sinan's works are there. Architect Sinan has done more than 500 works in one lifetime. I always wonder what we do in our lifetime. I mean, that's an inspiration to think of. Travel a lot, travel as much as possible, document what you can, and enjoy life over there. And then my travels, I take a trip. There was a purpose of making a book on Bihar. I, with a friend of mine, Mustanshu Zalvi, we traveled to Bihar and did a lot of trial shoots, but the book could not come out. And the architecture of Bihar and the Buddhist architecture, the Islamic architecture, the Jain architecture, and the colonial architecture is a great mix over there. The book was to be titled as Cultural Capital of India. I hope it comes out at some point of a time. And the second visit was to a place called Vishnupur. Beautiful terracotta work. I have never ever seen such good terracotta work anywhere in any place, anywhere I went to. And I think one should visit Vishnupur. Take a look at those temples. You have the whole of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and all kind of stories. Unbelievable work over there. And then comes to my other personal mention that one must visit museum, because we all go when we are in schools to museums, like small kids in small line, but museums collect a lot. My favorite place to go and have a cup of coffee is the Prince of Wales Museum, the Bhaudajilan Museum. I always want to go to see the Desert Rose Museum in Qatar made by John Noel, I think, and I'm waiting for the Mont Blanc Museum to come up in Hamburg, which will have a complete collection of Mont Blanc. They say that they'll complete the museum in 2 years. Museums which otherwise do not attract people, I think the places that architects, particularly teachers, and the students must visit. It's a collection, a great storehouse of history, of memory, and what all you can think of. And then talks. I mean, I have been giving talks. I gave talks on fountain pens. I gave talks on photography. I also attend talks because it's only when you hear people you learn how to speak, what to speak. And my favorite was the Z-axis talks by Charles Correa down Goa, the 361 talks that happen in Bombay. Every alternate Friday or every Friday, I think they have a talk in C College of Architecture, and they have done more than 50 talks. I mean, nothing like a college doing talks on architecture, on issues related to architecture for the benefit of students. I wonder how many colleges of architecture in India try doing that. Photographic Society of India for last 50 years conducts a lecture on photography every Friday evening. People who are passionate about it can go and listen over there. And of late, last I think couple of years, I've been attending talks at Gyan Prava, and that's a place full of knowledge. You can hear to people talking of all topics, and my favorite topic which I attend are, as I mentioned earlier, the Buddhist and the Islamic architecture. And it's a place, it's like a temple to me. It's like the place that I would always want to go for any lecture that takes over there. In all my journey, I was lucky to meet people, which all of you might be thinking was Buckminster Fuller. When I was in fourth year architecture, Buckminster Fuller had himself come to Bombay. In USIS, he gave a lecture. I attended that. Friend of mine, Masood Taj, who did a lot of work, who did stay with Hassan Fateh, and Hassan Fateh came to his house. I was lucky to see Hassan Fateh, such a sober, thorough gentleman I have never seen in my life. Paolo Soleri talking of environment was a lecture that I heard. These three people says something I was lucky to have heard. And of course, Masood Taj is a wonderful speaker. I mean, if opportunities are available, you should hear him. Speaks fantastic, is tremendous, is knowledgeable beyond compare, and a great oral poet. I mean, I have heard him for ages, and you should try and look at his calligraphy that he does over there. In art, I like to see art of all kinds, because as a very popular saying, if art had nothing to do with architecture, it would have been so easy to make buildings. That says it all, that if you're not connected to art, you're not connected to architecture. Maybe what kind of art? It can be music, it can be dance, it can be drama, it can be painting, it can be sculpture. And my famous artist was M.F. Hussain. I had a huge collection of books on M.F. Hussain, and I cannot forget the exhibition called Shvetambari about 25 or 30 years ago, where he put a long white cloth and did not put a painting. And that proved a point that you cannot take the mind of an artist for granted, and that was M.F. Hussain. I've yet to see a more brilliant artist than M.F. Hussain in all kind of terms and expressions. I love him like anything. And that's the whole journey. And I remember the word BJNT, which was used in the admission process, that we have all kind of seats open, reserved, and we had that SC, ST, OBC, VJNT. And I was always curious of VJNT, that is Vibhukta Jati and Nomadic tribes. And I would always suggest everybody, irrespective of your caste, belong to VJNT, because you become a vagabond and you become what you otherwise call as a bhatya, a guy who goes from place to place, enjoys by going to these places and learn on his own. And I would say the aimless traveler is the one who learns the most, because if you have fixed aims, you only go and pursue those aims. Just walk out of your house, get up on a Sunday and leave the house and think, let's go. Where should not be thought. It's only then you'll learn the maximum. That's what I think. And to conclude, I will say that passion is the essence of life. Follow a passion, follow life. Thank you.